This is a Magic the Gathering card that you are not playing in your commander decks, but it can trip up your opponents and wrap up the win. This is a card called Tangle Wire, and while at first it might seem like a symmetrical effect, properly navigating its utility will put you ahead. For 3 generic mana, it's an artifact. It has Fading 4, which means this artifact enters the battlefield with 4 fade counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a fade counter from it. If you can't, sacrifice it. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player taps an untapped artifact, creature, or land he or she controls for each fade counter on Tangle Wire. So you cast Tangle Wire, comes into play with those 4 fade counters on it, and then during each of your opponent's upkeeps, they must tap 4 of those types of permanents listed on the card. So when it comes back to our turn on our upkeep, there are 2 abilities on there that say at. So there are 2 triggered abilities that need to go on the stack. So first on the stack, we're going to put that ability where we have to tap a number of permanents equal to the number of fade counters on Tangle Wire. And then on top of that, we are going to put the triggered ability that removes a fade counter from it. So we remove a fade counter from it, it goes down from 4 to 3. Now we only have to tap 3 of those types of permanents. But what's great is we can tap Tangle Wire as one of those permanents. Now we only have to tap 2, whereas all of our opponents previously had to tap 4. So let's talk about some of the decks where this is low-hanging fruit, where it's going to slot in really easily if you're playing this archetype. The first being Equipment, because Equipment doesn't care whether it's tapped or not. You can still use its equip ability. If it's attached to a creature, it doesn't matter if you tap that Swiftfoot Boots, it's still going to do what it says it does. Second would be token-based decks. Doesn't matter what kind of tokens you're making, whether it's clue tokens, elf tokens, whatever. You're going to have a lot more at your disposal to tap than your opponents likely are. Third is Proliferate. Oh boy, as if we needed any more excuses to make Atraxa good. Atraxa is going to be able to add another fade counter at the end of your turn. So basically, as long as Atraxa is on the board, you're going to keep putting those fade counters back on, and that Tangle Wire is just going to stay out there indefinitely. This is also a meta topic because WotC is leaning heavily into the goad mechanic. This is where you can force one of your opponent's creatures to attack one of your other opponents. So this is a great defensive ability for us because if our opponent tries to goad one of our creatures and we don't want to attack with it, we can use the Tangle Wire to tap it down and make sure it can't attack. Now the card spiked recently, used to be less than $5. These days it's around $10 to $15, but I still think that this is a fairly solid investment because it's only been reprinted one time in a From the Vault set. Oh, and if you've been wondering about my shirt, there's an awesome music artist called Master Boot Record. Basically, it sounds like heavy metal coming out of a Super Nintendo. Or better yet, it sounds like the soundtrack for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. He's had a new album that just came out a few weeks ago. Highly recommend it. Go check out Master Boot Record, especially on Spotify. I have it on repeat. He's awesome.